All right, I believe we are live, everybody. Welcome to the Love First Christians Bible study. And as we get started, I am joined by Aaron Goss. Aaron, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Sorry I'm late.
Oh, you're okay. You are late by I think I started. We've been live for 9 seconds, so
There you go.
that gives you perspective how late you are. I haven't even introduced myself yet. I am Hody Johns, and we're here just to do the weekly Bible study with the Love First Christians. As always, you have an open invite to join us. There is a link in the description of this show that will take you there. We welcome non-Christians, people with complicated questions, Christians who have been part of the 20 years of as part of their bishopric. It is all any and all. If you just feel like you want some love first guidance that can help create unity during discussions where we may even have disunity. I was impressed while I was gone. There was a bit of a disagreement between a couple of individuals, and it was handled very well because of that love first principle, which I really appreciate. And I can appreciate the differences that they were having, largely semantic, but interesting enough debate. Aaron, did you want to get us started with any verses that you had on your mind from the reading this week? And you are muted, but your face is beautiful.
Well, we share one that passage, so I'll save that one for later.
Okay.
Specifically, the one that I had was Jesus and Abraham story, which is early on this week's reading. I wanted to just read it out loud because I was puzzling over it a little bit.
Sure. What section is that? I'll go ahead and put it on screen.
That is John 8:31 through 59.
Okay, let's see here. John 8, share this tab.
So it says,
put this up on the screen.
While you're pulling it up, I'll read it.
Yeah,
Jesus said to the people who believed in him, "You are truly my disciples if you remain faithful to my teachings, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." "We are descendants of Abraham," they said. "We've never been slaves to anyone. What do you mean you will be set free?" Jesus replied, "I tell you the truth." Wait, I apologize. Okay, no, I am right. Okay. I tell you the truth, everyone who sins is a slave of sin. A slave is not a permanent member of the family, but a son is a part of the family forever. So if the son sets you free, you truly are free. Yes, I realize that you are descendants of Abraham, and yet some of you are trying to kill me because there's no room in your hearts from my message. I am telling you what I saw when I was with my father, but you are following the advice of your father. Our father is Abraham, they declared. No, Jesus replied, for if you were really the children of Abraham, you would follow his example. Instead, you are trying to kill me because I told you the truth, which I heard from God. Abraham never did such a thing. No, you are imitating your real father. They replied, we aren't illegitimate children. God himself is our true father. Jesus told them, if God were your father, then you would love me, because I have come to you from God. I am not here on my own, but he sent me. Why can't you understand what I'm saying? It's because you can't even hear me. For you are the children of your father, the devil, and you love to do evil things he does. He was a murderer from the beginning. He has always hated the truth because there is no truth in him. When he lies, it is consistent with his character, for he is a liar and the father of lies. So when I tell you the truth, you just naturally don't believe me. Which of you can truthfully accuse me of sin? And since I am telling you the truth, why don't you believe me? Anyone who belongs to God listens gladly to the words of God. But you don't listen because you don't belong to God. The people retorted, you Samaritan devil, didn't we say all along you are possessed by a demon? No, Jesus said, I have no demon in me, for I honor my Father, and you dishonor me. And though I have no wish to glorify myself, God is going to glorify me. He is the true judge. I tell you the truth, anyone who obeys my teaching will never die. The people said, now we know you are possessed by a demon. Even Abraham and the prophets died. But you say, anyone who obeys my teaching will never die. Are you greater than our father Abraham? He died, and so did the prophets. Who do you think you are? Jesus answered, if I want glory for myself, it doesn't count, but it is my Father who will glorify me. You say, he is our God, but you don't even know him. I know him. If I said otherwise, I would be as great a liar as you. But I know him, and I obey him. Your father Abraham rejoiced as he looked forward to my coming, He saw it and was glad. The people said, "You aren't even 50 years old. How can you say you've seen Abraham?" Jesus answered, "I tell you the truth, before Abraham was even born, I am." At that point, they picked up stones to throw at him, but Jesus was hidden from them and left the temple. So before I give my thoughts, I was curious, like, what do you think about this?
So I noted this, and I actually even noted it's worth reading the entire passage, because like it's like I almost want to just quote this whole thing. So I appreciate you reading it all, because I think the whole this whole interaction is interesting. I mean, my initial thoughts are it's Jesus delineates between following your father and your father in heaven. That there is a difference between your traditions and what God wants for you. Obviously, God doesn't want us to be disobedient for the sake of disobedient. He doesn't want to dishonor our parents, right? That's something Jesus even reiterates. But to just obey their traditions and just do whatever it is they did because they did it is wrong. I love that Jesus is like, what was the spirit of Abraham? You're trying to follow the rules of Abraham, but you're not following the spirit of Abraham. And Abraham was someone who was very open to things that challenged, what he thought he knew, something that, examples that we have from Abraham where he's like, I don't really want to do that. And God's like, I need you to do that. He's like, okay. We have a generation of people, in this current passage that is saying, I want to behave this way. I know that the right thing to do is probably that, but I can't bring myself to do it, because that's just not what my parents did. And I respect their traditions more than what God is putting on my heart. To me, this is like, I think I'm very sensitive to this message because it's something that's radicalized my faith so much, is being open to the Holy Spirit as opposed to just open to what words on the page say or what the law says. And if I place the word of God in my heart beneath what I've been taught by my priests or parents or whatever's been passed down generation to generation, then I'm doing the wrong thing. And we also have Bray here who says, "Hey, what up, fam?"
Hey,
Bray, I am glad to have you here. We are about to get to one of Bray's favorite passages, and he had some great insights about it that I'll bring up later. But yeah, those are kind of my thoughts about it. How about you?
So I was puzzling it over primarily because Jesus's recipient of the message is his own followers. Like, he's not talking to Pharisees in this point. He's talking to people who already believe in him. And like, you've gotten a positive message out of this, and I could see the positive message that you're getting out of it and the logic behind what you're saying. But man, reading this, if I didn't already love Jesus, and appreciate his his message, I could read this as like almost like a cult leader, like spiritually negging his disciples to like go into further devotion to prove their worth to them. Like
Sure.
you understand what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
it reads really bad. Like it doesn't feel like tough love. It feels like I'm going to attack you out of nowhere to make you feel defensive so that I can get my hooks in you further. And I'm not saying that that's not what it is. I'm just saying that's how it comes across.
I mean, yeah, I do think at this point Jesus has been pretty clear about measuring him by his works and deeds, and if he was, we do have to be careful with cult stuff. I get what you're saying. I think it's in the particular, like, if God were your father, you would love me. Like, if you really love God, you would love me too, kind of thing. And I can see that. And there's definitely been abused by some cultists for sure. This kind of like, if we're saying that this is the tactic that Jesus is using, I think he's challenging what is comfortable to them as opposed to trying to get them to, because what Jesus is saying is true. If you love God the Father, like the same God of Abraham, you would love Jesus because they are the same, right? Like they are, we can talk about the Trinity all day, but at least the very same in purpose or whatever. They come in, in equal amounts. But there is an element of just being like, one of the reasons that I think it's so important for people to think about cults, one of the reasons I have it posted in the Love First Christians and bookmarked and there for everybody to see, is because we are encouraging people, both cults and legitimate religions are encouraging you to let go of part of yourself. Really dangerous stuff in a cult, right? Really positive stuff if you're trying to get somebody clean off of drugs, right? It's a, and so like there's a line, even if the tactic is somewhat similar, and it is important. I agree with you that this is not, certainly I'm glad Jesus is saying this, and therefore not anybody else can say this, because I wouldn't want somebody else to say this unless they were themselves God, so I get that.
That brings me to another thing I was like mulling over is, okay, so take the disciples of Jesus, or basically anybody that was alive at the same time that Jesus was alive and witnessing his ministry. What brings people of that time period who are witnessing Jesus's ministry to him as the Messiah? Is it their own discernment? Is it the Holy Spirit? Is it Jesus performing miracles? What is the impetus for them to recognize Jesus as the Messiah, as non-learned individuals for the most part? Most of them are not literate. They're not familiar with they're probably not familiar with all of the ancient messianic prophecies that Jesus has to go forward to be called the Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
You understand what I'm getting at?
Yeah. What makes Jesus so attractive? And we don't,
not just why is he charismatic, but sure, why is he the Messiah?
I believe Jesus answers this specifically in a few verses from now, where he's like, I'll tell you why I'm the Messiah, because I've already told you I'm the Messiah. And they're like, no, you didn't. He's like, look at my works. That's how you can tell I'm the Messiah, right?
Well, he says that in the next section or something like that, later on in the reading. But I guess I'm not saying from his perspective that he views himself as the Messiah. I'm asking, why should the people view him as the Messiah, I guess, within that same time period? Because the penalty for people that followed the flock of a false Messiah is pretty strong. Jesus condemns them for doing that. And God,
there's a natural consequence to it too, right? Yeah, putting your faith in somebody who's a charlatan. Yeah,
right. So I guess what's the discernment there?
That I guess because Jesus' works are so positive. Mm-hmm. And I would think, and obviously it depends on how you measure positive. We use fruit of the Spirit, right? As our metric. It's not just I'm getting rich. It's that's a positive for some people, but that's not the way we're to judge. But I would say the fruit of the Spirit is what it is, and that's really important to know if somebody's come in their name, in Christ's name, if he's actually being a servant to Christ, and if so, then the fruit of the Spirit will abound, and if not, then it won't. We won't have all of it. So what keeps people coming back for that is, Jesus. It's almost become I feel like the theme was there in the others. With John, it almost reaches comical levels of proportions of being you're here because I'm performing miracles, but you need to stop doing that, right? Yeah. I get the miracles are cool. That, but what is really going to heal people? In fact, Jesus even says you'll be capable of greater healing than I'm capable of doing in my life, which we may think sounds controversial, except you just think of things like modern vaccines medicine and camper treatments and stuff like that, and we say, oh yeah, right. We have done more healing than even Jesus done. And we were talking last week, in fact, about food reproduction, right, and how to get more of that.
Well, actually, both of those tie in pretty nicely together in the sense that, thinking about it further of my own questions and then your answers to them, none of what Jesus did in his earthly ministry was for self-aggrandizement on Jesus's part. And if you were to view Jesus through the skeptical lens of like a cultist.
Mhm.
Like, what do cultists do? Like, they formulate all this power around themselves. They build up like personal harems and things like that. And Jesus didn't do any of that. Like, you know,
Yeah.
he was in poverty until his death, essentially. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
surfing his way through his ministry.
Sure, right. I mean, Jesus essentially lived as the Levites were supposed to, right?
Yeah.
Owning no property or forfeiting the property that he does have to live as a foreigner wherever he went, you know? And that was kind of his role. And that's supposed to be the role of kind of what we would call prophets or disciples or higher ups in the church nowadays. That's the way they're supposed to live. That's re-emphasized later. And yeah, like kind of the forfeiture of the do what I say. And Jesus, of course, has a right to say, I do what I say because he's God. I mean, keep my commandments and all that. I wouldn't say that, like, obviously in passages like this, Jesus doesn't really shirk from that, right? Which is almost why it's so off-putting, right? Because he's actually like, listen, I am the star of the show. I'm aware of that, right? But what makes me the star is my servitude. It's my willingness to serve others. It's me placing myself beneath everybody, not me placing myself above everybody. That makes it so that I earn the spotlight in God's eyes. Bray says we also have to remember that Abraham in the Bible and that tradition had little to do with the real Abraham and his traditions. It could be Jesus calling out how the culture had perverted Abraham's faith. And that's kind of what I was going at there as well. That like what Abraham taught, what the faith was supposed to be, had gone kind of a radically different direction. It's one of the interesting things. I feel like one of the reasons Jesus' ministry is so important for us to read about now is to say, like, yes, this was a good origin. Look what it's become. And adherence on these traditions over the truth, and adherence on these written law over what the Holy Spirit tells you. And I kind of feel that's something we see a lot again nowadays. Jesus says, no person comes to the Father without his yearning for them. Makes me lean toward the Spirit guiding them toward Jesus. Yeah. Like that there's a yearning there. Like, I think while there are like the magic tricks, absolutely. And that's, I understand. I relate very much to the Bible. This portion of the Bible is a very real story. Because if there is somebody who's just like snapping fingers and curing blindness, I will also find that to be more notable than them just teaching. I mean, to be honest, kind of what I teach, right? Like just heal people and be nice to them and be good and whatever. But like Jesus is like, that's really what matters, though. That culture of goodness is going to do more than any snapping of fingers and magic tricks than he can do. That like, yes, you're here for like free food. Jesus understood that. Like people were there to get fed. People were there to, to get all that. But he turned it about more than just, well, I guess he didn't even turn about more than that. He was like, that's the central message. They're going to get the message that way. Yes, we are a place where you can get food if you're hungry. That's the gospel. Like, that's kind of what we're supposed to be here on earth. I feel like I might not have answered your question really well. I guess I really like this passage, and maybe I've got blinders on that I don't see it as maybe problematic as you. I do think it's interesting they call him a Samaritan, somebody that was descended from, because the Samaritans both had an Abrahamic faith, but were not like Jewish, right? Like they were recognized like different prophets, different lineage, and everything like that. And so they're like, well, there's something God-ish about you, but like we've clearly schismed to the point where you're doing something completely different. And Jesus is like, no, I'm not, right? Like, you can say I'm not teaching what the old guys taught, but I'm really teaching in the spirit of what those old guys taught. I guess that's what I get out of this passage.
I mean, it just came across really harsh.
Yeah.
Like it was very condemnation, and it was. I mean, if this conversation was taking place between Jesus and the Philistines,
The Pharisees.
Pharisees. I'm sorry.
I believe it is. Let me.
Well, he's talking to his disciples.
I think
it says like the very beginning words. Jesus said to the people who believed in him.
Let's see. Jesus spoke again to the people. He said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but have the light of life. The Pharisees challenged him, saying, here you are, appearing as your own witness. Your testimony is not valid. Jesus answered. They asked he responds. Once more, Jesus says to them, this made the Jews ask. I think maybe there's a...
Maybe it's just the fact that are you reading for earlier in the same, like before the...
Yeah, just before that. Like, okay. Starting at verse 13 or whatever.
Gotcha. Okay, I only have the Bible in a day
section. Yeah, you're at 31. To the Jews who believed him, Jesus said. And so, if you hold to my teaching, then you're really my disciples. And I guess that part seems a little less bad to me. He's kind of encouraging them to shake off like the last of their shackles, which is kind of what their fathers had placed on them, right? That the teachings of their parents have kind of really kind of kept them locked up, and they're like, well, of course we're free. And it's like, you're free. I mean, this is something that I know you relate to, Aaron, is coercion looks more than just like a guy with a gun to your head forcing you to do something, right? Like, there are so many coercive activities that we have, and like, oh, you don't fit in with this society, we're not going to kick you out, but there's going to be all these consequences. And that's really horrifying to people, like really, really damaging. Ray says, foreshadowing, Jesus could have snapped his fingers to heal the blind man, but he saw the Sanhedrin and said, nah, let me make a potion for this. Yeah. We're going to get into potion making in just a second here a little bit. Let's go ahead and talk about the Old Testament a little bit, because I've got a little bit of a spicy take on this one here. I was taught from a very early age that it was before I even read the story of Jonathan and David, before I had even read it. And I was taught, hey, listen, these guys are not gay. It's totally normal to have a really close relationship with a guy. And I agree with that. And I do think that there's a problem with having like a close, both physical and emotional relationship with a guy doesn't make you gay, right? Like, that shouldn't be one of those things that makes you like on the queer spectrum, to just be like, we recognize it a lot when we try to get people free of the manosphere, is that people are longing in these types of physical connections that aren't just sexual, right? To be able to hold a guy, to be able to tell a man, I love you, like women often are able to, without being accused of being gay or whatever, right? Like, it's hard I'll admit it's even hard for me. But as I studied this passage more and more, I realized that one of the reasons that this was taught so early is because it was supposed to throw a cover over what I can obviously recognize as something that's quite true. And that's that David and Jonathan were in... There's nothing... They were in... I'll just go ahead and say, I believe they were in not just a, like, committed, legally sense binding union, which they were that at the very least, first of all. But the term, like, they knew each other, is the same word that they use like sexually in other passages. I am not trying to insert this message in here. In fact, I'm kind of doing the opposite, that I'm kind of undoing a lot of the dirt that has been buried upon this story and washing that away so that you can kind of read it for yourself. And there's a few bullet points I have here. But one is, first of all, with David versus Goliath, David is like, so I get to choose one of Saul's kids to marry? And it's like, yes, that's what he says. And David actually asked multiple groups this. Like, I want to make sure I heard him right, that I get to choose who I marry if I can beat Goliath. And they're like, yes, that's true. And David kills Goliath. And then the first thing he does when he gets back to Saul is being like, I love your son, Jonathan. Now, nothing wrong with saying you love your son, Jonathan, sure. But in context, the whole thing was David was like, I get to marry one of his kids. And then they proceed with having this ceremony. They exchange clothing as they have. We've already read this in the Old Testament, as in a typical marriage ceremony. When two become one, you share each other's possessions, right? You swap clothes. So these two swap clothes. I will say that sometimes that is brought up as like we got naked in front of each other and swap clothes, but they're swapping like multiple pairs of shoes and stuff. So like, it's not like they're wearing all that on them. I'm want to be careful because I'm not trying to like add more gay things that are already there. I don't need to. I thought it was really funny that I was looking at this, like, was there a gay relationship? And the Got Questions is fine about half of the time for answering like religious questions, but they are conservative. And so it's funny because they were like, listen, this word love here can mean sexual or not, but it really depends on the context. So like you have to read into the context. And I mean, to pull up the context of the term love that they used, it said their souls were knit to each other. That David gives his soul to Jonathan and Jonathan to David. I'm reading the old, like the interlinear Bible, right? Like the Jewish language here, is that they were knit to each other and they loved each other. And like, this is not like a love I have for the poor, right? Like, it's funny that they even cite with this exact, they have a section about this exact thing. It was like, you'd be able to read it if it was gay, because it would say they'd like, they were like combining souls or something. And it's like, well, yeah, that's blatantly what this thing says they did. The two families are become one at this point. I do like, there is some, and to add some further clarification, David does later marry one of Saul's daughters, right? But it's actually before that happens that they're recognized as part of the same family, that the two families have merged. They refer to their kids together as our kids. Now, I grant, obviously, they're two guys. They're not having, neither one got pregnant or anything, but they raise their kids together, right? As they talk about when David's got to run away, he's like, what are we going to do about the kids? And it's like, hey, I'll take care of them, and everything like that, getting that organized out. So when David actually goes to marry one of Saul's daughters, and it's really important that you have a good interpretation of this verse as well. And this is when I again linked the original language, the Hebrew. Saul says, oh, so you'll become my son-in-law again, as he prepares to marry one of the daughters. Now, this is after he turns down the older daughter because he likes the younger one better. But it's very clear that a lot of verses will change this into saying you have a second opportunity to become my son-in-law, which would mean he, of course, he passed on the older one, married the younger one. So, that makes sense. That's not what the original language says. In fact, Saul notes that he's paying a second dowry in this case. Where was the first? Now, maybe you say, maybe he married one of Saul's other daughters. We actually have the name of all Saul's children listed out within the Bible and within historical record, and who they married. And David was not married to any of them. So David received a dowry for whatever union thing he had with Jonathan. I am not trying to insert something gay where there shouldn't be something gay. But David's relationship with Jonathan is something that we absolutely could consider marriage. We would consider marriage by our means. Now, were they physical together? The context clue on that word love would say that yes, they were, but I don't know. I don't have a video camera in there or anything like that. But it is funny the preemptive work the church goes through to make you try to throw out like 8 different verses in the Bible in order to make David and Jonathan's relationship platonic. It's wrong, and it is attempting to cover up something that was actually rather regular and something that you will see as you do anthropology in this era. In fact, many anti-Semitic people will note that the Jews have a long history of gay relationships and gay marriage and stuff like that. It's just something they practiced. Whether people can argue they weren't supposed to be practicing it, but the bottom line is they did. Jewish poets, Jewish rabbis that were gay. And this is just another example, I think, of a relationship that they're trying to wash out, because the implication is that being bisexual, being polyamorous, being gay, all that must be bad, even if you have consent, even if it's a good functioning relationship.
One thing that you didn't mention throughout all of this recounting is that through all of this taking place, God was clearly on David's side. Like, God, very much so, David was in God's favor.
Yeah, the relationship between Jonathan and David is blessed, right? Like, yes. Yeah, God's in his favor, right? And this is not something that it's like God was a little bit upset about this. Bray says, look, the editors from the Demiurgic period missed a few things. By the way, this exact same thing happened in Islam. Originally, there were a lot of gay Muslims. Yeah, this is, I think it goes back to even the thing we read in just the section prior to this, that we follow the traditions of our Abraham. In Abraham, we follow the traditions of our fathers at the expense of throwing out the spirit of this. You know, the spirit of, it's okay to have this relationship if that's what's healthy. That's what's good for your kids and everything. I'm not commanding anybody to be gay, but I'm not commanding anybody to be straight either, right? Like, you just do what you do and do what's healthy for you. Jonathan and David did what was healthy for them, and God bless him for it. It's, you know, and he does. It's an embarrassing cover up, and it's so preemptive. I hate how preemptive this is within the church, because I think almost all of us that went through the church, even non like super conservative churches, had this warning up before we got to read these passages for ourselves. And it's done intentionally because they don't want us to read what is obvious on the page.
The only question I had that would be in contrast to what you've been saying,
yeah,
and then I'm curious if you have an answer to, is prior to David becoming part of the main narrative, he's Jesse's youngest child, and he's a shepherd's boy. I got the impression he was somewhere in the neighborhood of like 8 to 13. I didn't explicitly say his age, but like that was the impression that I got, that his older brothers were at war, so they were probably at least 15 plus, and that, you know, he was younger. And I don't remember, and there was any, but I don't remember any sort of connection to Saul or Jonathan, or, you know, like prior to while he was still a shepherd's boy. And so when he's asking these questions about, you know, to the soldiers repeatedly and everything like that, had he met Jonathan prior to that? I mean, would he have trafficked in the same circles as Jonathan and Saul's family at large, being a lower class like that?
That is a great question. When did David meet Jonathan? I'm even going to turn this over to Google, because I think he wasn't playing the harp for him by then. That was after. Let's see here. Yeah, boy, one of the first instances we have of them is them getting their souls knit together.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
So I do know that he had been recruited by Samuel by this point, right? And Samuel did take him to meet Saul, so I would just assume
they met each other.
Yeah, during that meeting. It'd be nice if we had a little more depth to it, though. That's a great question, because the first we have is just kind of them getting married, which I guess isn't out of line for many of our other biblical stories, but it would be kind of nice if they had something like that. Praise you say. Also, not going to say explicitly that there was freakiness going on here, but traditionally speaking, a dowry is paid in exchange for deflowering as insurance for divorce. Yeah. Right. Yeah, it's I mean, they do a marriage ceremony. I don't know what to say. Like, I don't know. It's I guess I do know, but people don't like the implications. Obviously, Aaron and I are just fine with it, but I think that, and God is fine with it too. I think there's a lot of work that people have to do to kind of erase this. And I would double check your sources. This is one that if you type like, were David and Jonathan gay, like, you're going to get the answer no, but you should check those sources and why they say no. A lot of them are going to cite the same passages that I have told you about, and then been like, well, let me try to explain that the context and this. Yeah, read the context. that's fine with me.
Before they've been translated, yeah.
Right. They're like, well, love is also love for the poor and love for this. You really have to read like this kind of love. I know gets used sexually a lot, but you know, that's only if the words around it are sexual. And I'm sorry, if your souls are getting knit to one another, that's we've got terms about becoming one flesh in the Bible, right? Don't we, Aaron? At some point, yeah. Bray says I'm fine with it too, and it's because of this relationship that David survived Saul's first attempt on his life. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's everything for a reason, right? All this good stuff.
But also another question about the story is,
Yeah.
well, I got a couple of questions about this story overall, not just the relationship, but also the broader David-Saul dynamic. So did he get married? I can't remember in the story. Did he get married to Saul's second daughter? I think he did, right?
Yeah, he gets married to sadly a daughter, and then the daughter gets taken by Saul and given away to another guy.
Okay,
because that daughter is actually really loves David. Yeah, we actually have
right.
Yeah, we actually have the earliest instance of lying to the Nazis about where the Jews are, and when she takes a household idol, puts it under the sheets, sticks some like goat hair on there, and like, sleep in there or whatever. And then, to her credit and props to her, she even saves herself too. When they're like, "Why did you lie?" She's like, "He said he'd kill me if I didn't." Right? Like, sure, lie. If it saves lives, lie. Yeah. I'm big on the truth. I'm not big on bearing false witness. Obviously, I'm a Christian. I'm not supposed to do that. But
the reason I asked, like, did they get married, is because I couldn't solidly remember, because I knew they had that relationship in the sense that, like, she was willing to lie for him and try to say, succeeded in saving his life.
Yeah.
But the thing that made me wonder if they were married was that David never tried to come back for her. Like, she saved his life, and like he never tried to he had multiple opportunities to kill Saul. I mean, we saw that. So you would think that if he had the ability to, he would have just retrieved her, if he loved her. And it may have been a situation where, like, for the purposes of the families, he was married legally to her, but and they loved each other in a familial or friendly way, but he was married to Jonathan. I mean, like Game of Thrones style, like Marjorie and Loras.
Bray says Saul was forced into kinship, and it was David because God thwarted every attempt Saul made to usurp the throne back to himself. At the same time, Saul was petty about it. Yeah, Saul was really petty about it. Saul killed thousands and David killed 10,000s, and he can't handle that. That just
it's some Wile E. Coyote nonsense. Like it was like Jews in Egypt, like being constantly shown miracles and still doubting immediately, like right afterwards, like levels of denial in the way that Saul acted, which was weird.
Yeah. Any other Bible verses you wanted to get to?
No, those were the two that I wanted to talk about. You covered both of them.
Cool. There's a lot of good ones. Obviously, we don't have time to go over all of them. There's a couple in Proverbs that I'll just do real quick just because I like them and they speak for themselves. But a bowl of vegetables with someone you love is better than steak with someone you hate. That's cool, and it's so true, right? Like I understand you'd be disappointed about the vegetables over the steak, but unpleasant company is not fun. He gives the childless woman a family, making her a happy mother. Really like that there is this, that there are women that can't conceive on their own, that deserve to have families too if they want them. Recently, I guess it was just this week, we had Matt Walsh. Well, maybe it was last week, but we never talked about it. But just up there saying, I remember he was on Tucker Carlson, and it was like, so you think these people are better off, not having families at all than having like loving gay parents? And he's like, yeah, and I think the evidence bears that out. And Tucker Carlson's like, so they're like studies? And he's like, yeah, studies. I mean, they won't hold up to like fact check or whatever, but like, and I was like he says that as such an aside, and it's just like, okay, so like there's like a study performed by like a raging fascist Nazi or something that is like, the children will be happier in the streets than with the gay people, and like that's his evidence. Like, it's just
this was years ago at this point. This is probably like 2 or 3 years ago at least. But Matt Walsh was on Joe Rogan. And
I go ahead and tell the story. It's a good one.
Like Joe Rogan is not even like actively hard interviewing him. He's just throwing him softball questions. And Matt Walsh makes the claim that like millions of kids are being transed by their parents, like in some sort of Munchausen's factory or something like that. And Joe Rogan's just like asking like softball questions, and he's like, do you have like, where's the evidence of this? Or whatever. And Matt Walsh immediately realizes, oh shit, I said millions. Like, there's no way I can prove that. And he's immediately starts backpedaling.
They look it up right in front of him, and it's like 12. And he's like, oh, well. And what does he say? Like, I guess the progressives are going to have fun with that clip or whatever.
Right.
Like, he knows exactly in that moment that he's hosed. Yeah. Let's see here. I think there was another one from Proverbs that I wanted to get to that I wanted to make sure I didn't miss. Well, the next one I have is Jesus. So I guess I'm still okay to talk about Jesus sometimes. Mm-hmm. Jesus said, if you were blind, you wouldn't be guilty, Jesus replied, but you remain guilty because you claim you can see. Critical moment here, because we have many people that just go, Lord, have mercy on me. I'm a sinner. I'm making mistakes. I know I'm making mistakes. As Christians, I'm going to be honest with you. We want to think that most of our sins are done in ignorance. It's not true. Most of the time, even if we don't know, like factually, we get some inkling from the Holy Spirit that what we're doing is wrong, right? Our conscience will tell us. I don't feel bad about it. I remember I was told this misleading thing that after you get baptized, that you still sin, but it's only like sins of ignorance, after that. Like, that desire to, that ability to do sin and knowing it's wrong, like goes away. It's not at all true. It's just not. Most of our sins we do knowing that they're wrong. But that's not what condemns us, right? That the idea is that we're like, man, I'm struggling with this thing and I can't seem to fight it. I look at somebody struggling with like addiction, right? Who is just like, I know this is wrong. I know I should just not smoke another cigarette, but I can't. It's too hard, right? And we talk about cigarettes because like we're like, oh, well, that's a chemical addiction. So is many of our social interactions when we examine neurology.
Any form of addiction is a chemical reaction. Even if it's not things that are like literally metabolic, you've got things like porn, for instance. That's literally, your brain demanding the dopamine hit that comes with looking at that sort of stuff. Like, I mean, it is a chemical reaction, even if it's not like something you're injecting into your body.
Yeah. Right. It's all chemicals, right? Yeah. All neurology is chemicals, right? So like this addiction to social stigma is stronger than like heroin. I mean, it's like when people do like studies on this stuff, right? Like our mistakes, you need to have a lot of compassion for people that have them. And ultimately, Jesus is like, hey, these guys who are getting to heaven are like, I'm a tax collector. I know it's one of the worst things I could do. And I'm a sinner. And God help me with my sins, right? Like, and that's okay. Like, these people are gonna make it into heaven, right? That those struggles we have, that we know that they're bad, but we can't seem to win. God recognizes those too. There's a shame associated with like sinning in knowledge. And I get why that exists, right? Like nobody wants to be the guy reaching for more cigarettes when he knows cigarettes give him cancer, right? Like I get that, right? But that's the human experience, all of us, right? I can't tell you, I probably fail daily. I hate this about myself, but I still am flippant with people that say like mean, degrading things about me, knowing I should take the high road with them, knowing I should be like, is there a conversion opportunity here? I don't pass up the opportunity to dunk on people's faces when they set me up to dunk on their faces. I know I shouldn't, right? Like I know the right thing to do is to be more interested in conversion than shaming, right? Than like calling stuff out. But it's hard, right? Like
Jesus is on your shoulder, like turn the other cheek, and you're like, but I can totally don't own this noob.
And it feels so good, but I know it's so bad. Bray brings up a quote here. If my spirit understands that I sin and my body continues in sin, it is a problem with my body and not my spirit. That's very interesting. Wow. Thank you for pulling that out. That is exactly the point I'm trying to make here. Yeah, that like our bodies cause us to sin a lot, and our desire to do good is what matters. I think that there's a lot of people who struggle with sin. You know, we read these passages like the tax collector. I want to do good. I don't know how, right? Like, it's tough. It's too hard to do how, right? Like my body is weak. We're told that our bodies are going to be perfected, right? Our spirits are going to be what they are. And so if we're not having to fight our body against this, look for the passage posted in the Discord. If I can find it again, I would appreciate that. Bray also said earlier, this proverb makes me think of the woman who touched Jesus' hem. She supposedly suffered from perpetual menstruation, was healed from it. And yeah, she could potentially have been a childless woman, childless woman, made to think to have children and become a happy mother. Like, yeah, we don't know that that's true, but yeah, this could absolutely be part of like kind of a fulfillment of what we have in Proverbs, that it's like, yeah, like under us, you have children, like in this case, a direct miracle. But if you're like lesbian or intersex or trans or something, but like you feel that calling to be a mother, you should have it, right? Yeah, you should have that opportunity. A couple others here that I had. Oh, the next verse is a lot like what we were talking about. As Jesus was walking along, he saw a man who had been blind from birth. Rabbi, his disciples asked him, why was this man born blind? Was it because of his own sins or his parents' sins? And Jesus says, it is not because of his sins or his parents' sins. This happens so the power of God can be seen in him. What a beautiful thing to say about somebody who struggles from a disability. We are, I think oftentimes, even when we are well-meaning, we are demeaning a little bit, right, of people who have disabilities. And we don't say this is the power of God in you. And I think it's very specific. This is not just because a lot of people will be like, oh, the power of God could be seen in you when you're healed. No, that's the power of God seen in the healer. This is the power of God seen in you, the person who was born blind, that there is still godliness in there that we are supposed to see when we see somebody who has this type of disability, that we should be able to see the power of God in them. Because that's why, I mean, Jesus tells us that's why they're there. Do these people testify to the power and wonder of God, or do they testify to God's imperfections, right? Like, and there's a huge difference between those two ideas, right? That God is, you know, and I'm not one of those like everybody's born perfect. Obviously, cure cancer if you can cure cancer, cure the blind if you can cure the blind. But that these people are wonderful people, and we can see God within them even when they are disabled, right? That they are not born in anything other than the way God intended for them to be born. And if that means they struggle with this, then that's okay.
But also, you can see God in society by the way that they treat people like that. You know, well-treated people who can't care for themselves as well as or at all relative to their ability to survive. You know, societies that treat those people well obviously have God's spirit in them. You know, we're seeing the depreciation of that, you know, throughout the last couple of months. You know, as RFK gets up on his soapbox and talks about how people don't deserve to live, almost.
Yeah,
that like autism is a death sentence, essentially. We've talked about that in prior episodes.
Yeah, it's right. Do you see the love of God, or do you see like a plague? You know, it's a big difference. Yeah, and frustrating to have that. I do want to make sure before we get too far. I just passed the verse where Jesus is like, "Hey, I already told you I'm the Messiah. Did you not see the proof of my works?" And it's like, yeah, that's how it goes. The other one I had from Proverbs, which was short and sweet: plans go wrong for lack of advice. Many advisors bring success. Yeah, we should surround ourselves with lots of advice, even, you know, people who we might disagree with, and we might not side with the people we disagree with. And then if they're wrong, we can be like, yes, that's why I don't listen to you. But we should never turn down advice. Advice is good. let's see here. And then the last one that I just really wanted to cover. Oh, we had the resurrection of Lazarus. This is a pretty big one in John because we get a lot of new aspects of this story. It's clearly downplayed in the other parts of the gospel. Now, obviously, when you raise somebody from the dead, it's a pretty big deal. Jesus tells people, like, I'm glad I wasn't around for this guy to be dead because everybody is going to think it's like me creating a show, whereas this person has died on their own. And now I'm going to go heal them. Everybody recognizes them as dead. I'm not around. I'm not going to be like abracadabra. Everybody, and pull a magic trick. Everybody's going to recognize them. The Pharisees attempt to kill Lazarus or make a plan to kill Lazarus because now they successfully kill Jesus. Their plan is to kill Lazarus afterwards. They actually, and we don't know this based on the story, it just ends with them making those plans. But they actually failed to kill Lazarus because after Christ's death, there was a lot of fear what happened because of all the, I guess you could say, miraculous signs, the shaking. But even like Christ's humility on the cross garnered more sympathy towards like the Christians and his experience than like, yay, we killed him, he was just a human or whatever. So like the idea that Jesus was the Son of God was actually gaining a lot of steam, and killing Lazarus would only further cement them as the bad guys. So we actually only know because of like other records why Lazarus wasn't killed, but it's an interesting wrinkle to the story that's in John and not in anything not listed in anything else.
Oh, I'm sorry. I totally slipped my mind when we were talking about Saul and Jonathan and
you're good. You're good.
David. What an ignoble way that Jonathan ended up going out.
Yeah,
like he was a footnote in the story of Saul's death. And I mean, I didn't read further, so maybe this is not the case. But maybe if we would read further, but David doesn't get an opportunity to mourn him in the part of the Bible that we've read thus far. Maybe he does in the next, like tomorrow's readings or something like that. But as of the last episode, it's a TV show. But as of this last reading, he hasn't had a chance to do that.
I remember reading through the Bible my very first time, and that striking me as like really the notelessness made it all the more poignant to me. Like what was an important relationship to me to that point just was so simple. I think it's part of the author's style. We'll notice that unlike in previous passages when a prophet would die, there was like a lot to talk about. We just kind of get Samuel died. Like, that's it, right? At some point here. And it's like, dude, that is kind of glossing over a pretty major thing. They gave us a whole bunch of life points for both Samuel and Jonathan, and their death is just kind of like, well, that's how it goes. And you're just like, man, like,
well, like he didn't even die individually. He died as a set of brothers. He's just one person in this. I mean, granted, the brothers are just as important as he is in the grand scheme of things, but like, we haven't built up a connection with those other two. So like, I don't know who they are besides just their names. As opposed to Jonathan, who we've built a relationship with.
Yeah, it is notable. You're right to note that. I'm glad you wanted to go back because I actually almost missed this as well. There's an odd bit where David joins the Philistines.
Yeah.
It's off-putting, man. And is actually ready to go to battle alongside the Philistines against Saul. He is persuaded not to. Now, the reasoning is not what I would think. Basically, the Philistines don't want him there because they're like, this guy has killed us, like lots of us before, right? As well as killing like Goliath. Like this guy's it. Ultimately, they want him on their side because it's like, look, David joined us, but they don't want him actually physically there because they don't know if David's actually on their side. Well, in truth, David's not, but the way it's phrased, that David is actually ready to go to battle for the Philistines.
It's like having I mean, I can't help but like compare it to games and other like media and everything like that. Mm-hmm. To me, it reads like Disco Elysium, the mercenaries and the mercenary tribunal, like having a war criminal that you're hosting in your country, and he's like a rabid dog that you appease because you don't want him on your bad side, but like you constantly are worried that he's going to snap around and bite you. Because that's, I mean, that would be what he is relative to the Philistines. I mean, like the Philistines are like, you've murdered tens of thousands according to the stories of our people, and now you're just going to hang out in our country, and we're just supposed, or it's like conquest from Invincible, you know, like it's you're like, I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah, it's what are principles? I don't know. I don't know.
yeah. Well, and the
Fiscally
fact that like
significant.
his his stay in the Philistine is marred by him constantly going and killing off other tribes that are like south of Judea or whatever. And he's just like casually murdering entire villages worth of people with just this tiny little hand-picked group of soldiers. Like it's only like 600 soldiers or whatever.
Yeah.
That very much gives like the mercenary tribunal of Disco Elysium vibes. Like it's very much so the same cut of the same cloth.
Yeah, like I guess you can kind of play it up that all these people actually are bad people. So it's like killing everybody is kind of like, I guess they're all bad people. But yeah, I mean, obviously with the way we feel about war, I'm glad we are under the Christian New Covenant as opposed to whatever the heck this is. But
Right.
it certainly sours a bit the idea that, like, you know, when you want David to be a good guy, he's not a good guy by our standards. He probably at the time when he lived was doing what he could. But yeah. I wanted to mention one other thing, and it's a great policy that David instituted. And it's mentioned even within the scriptures. Oh, to clarify one of your further questions, I know that we actually get a retelling of some of the events in 1 Samuel into 2 Samuel. This is where we note that one of the things that I take away from this is in one, like it's God telling David to do the census, and another, it's Satan telling David to do the census. So I know that there are stories that retold, but I don't recall Jonathan getting more intricate there, which is too bad. But it's something we're going to read soon, so I guess that's something to look forward to. All right, I wanted to end on this one. Bray, this is one of his favorite passages in the whole Bible, and when he said it, Aaron, I don't know if you remember, but there was somebody else we were talking to who was like, it's one of my favorite passages too. And I always took like the Witch of Endor to be such like a, I don't know, just another odd story within the Old Testament. So I had Bray share a lot of like wisdom with me from the Discord.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to share a little bit there. The basic story is Saul, who has made witchcraft, mediuming, potion making, all that illegal, punishable by death. After Samuel's death, is eager to get back into touch with Samuel and actually finds a medium. First of all, he actually finds one and finds one that works. So that's something to think about as well, that apparently there are some people who are actually gifted with talking to people on the other side.
Well, yeah, that raised the question to me before you get started with what
sure.
your point of proper.
Yeah.
Is did her magic work because it worked innately within the context of her own power, or did her magic work because God willed it to work for the purposes of teaching the lesson to Saul? In which case, did she only have that power for that particular instance? And like everything else she was doing was like charlatan work, or did she consistently have power throughout her entire life, so that when she gave the demonstration to Saul, she would be just continuing on with what she had been doing prior? I just a thought that I had. Like, I've always been kind of curious with, like outside depictions of magic within the Bible that don't come from God, and the fact that the Bible seems to imply that these people are not actually just doing parlor tricks and stuff like that. They're actually like able to like actually do magic. And what does that say about God?
Yeah, I do believe that God gives gifts to people. We're told everybody, Christians or non, has some type of gift. I want to very clearly differentiate that from the fruit of the Spirit, because that's different. But like, there are gifts, and all of us have something. And one of those has to do with like discernment of spirits and communication and stuff. And like, there are some people who really are gifted at it. I do think that there, obviously, this is something that's infested with charlatanism, right? Like, there's no doubt about that. I recently read/listened to a documentary about Houdini. And he like made it a huge part of his work to expose the fraud stuff that was going on with mediums. That said, he did believe in mediums. He just was like, there's a lot of frauds here, right? Like, here's the tricks they're doing, here's how it's done. Even when he passed, he and his wife were like, I'm going to give you a code. I'm not going to give that code to anybody else. And you'll know that I'm actually like talking to you if they give you that code. No medium was actually ever able to deliver that code. So the level of charlatanism is high. I don't believe that it's common, for sure. Bray notes here that based on her reaction, it was hit or miss, and this was a very unique session. It's very possible that she was a charlatan and God just like gave her the powers to do this point, right? Like, to make this point, because he actually wanted her to contact Samuel. I believe if she had the ability, first of all, it's not our ability. I want to be clear about that. It's God giving us that ability. That I think it's possible, sure, right? Like, obviously, if you can do it with Samuel, who's to say God doesn't create other exceptions as well, right? Like, to talk to people whose dog died, you want to talk to them on the other side or something, right? Like, I don't know. Clearly, it's possible with Samuel, so it's possible with others as well. I actually think the witch is portrayed as a rather good person. Mm-hmm. And as Bray noted, this actually shadows like the Good Samaritan and some of the vibes we get from the New Testament, that this is a Gentile person who is not of the faith that is doing good works, right? This is somebody who feeds Saul, or at least attempts to feed Saul. I guess Saul does eventually eat at the behest of some other people, but like, you know,
she offers initially, you know, like he rebuffs her, but she tries. I kind of get, I relate everything to video games and media and stuff like that, but like, I relate these type of people to like Pellers from Witcher 3, you know, the herb women and stuff like that. Like for the most part, they're good people. They're just trying to like eke out a living and not get killed for heresy or whatever.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, call it paganism if you want, but if you can interact with spirits, that God is the one who gave you that power to do it. Right. So it, you know, it's a good question, Aaron. I wish I had a specific answer for you. I kind of gave you a bunch of angles, but I don't know.
Yeah. A lot of times when I ask questions like that, I'm not expecting like a definitive answer.
Give you the runaround quite a bit. Unfortunately, I think I've done that a couple times today, but yeah, I don't necessarily know. But yeah, I mean, first of all, let's start with the obvious. Saul is seeking somebody who he has ordered put to death, and then was like, oh crud, I actually need their help. We see this kind of often, I notice, with the medical industry in the United States, that it's like illegal to seek certain things unless you're rich and you really need it, in which case then you're able to get a hold of it. That's messed up, right? Like, it's really not cool to make it so that people can't obtain a service. Like, it's a victimless, if you want to call it crime, it's a victimless event, whatever it may be. And criminalizing it is wrong. And Saul his hypocrisy is exposed right on his face. Let's see here. Like, yeah, when he needs a spiritualist, that there's an exception to the rule, but when everybody else needs it, it can't be really important for them. Let's see here. Saul can't take the hint that God isn't answering him because of his spiritual corruption. Right. So Saul tries to contact Samuel on his own. And God's like, no, I don't, you haven't earned it. I don't like you. Like, get out of here. And this woman is able to. So once again, like, kind of eminent of that, like, you know, call them what religion they were, whether it's Rahab or the tax collectors or whatever. But if they do good deeds, if they are doing good things, if God has given them this gift, there's something they're doing that you're not doing, and God has chosen to, God, it's funny, gives this answer to Saul, but doesn't do it for the sake of Saul. He does it for the sake of the witch, right? Like the sake of the medium, right? That this girl, he's like, well, it's your gift. I'll listen to you. I'm not listening to this guy over here. I guess that's maybe why I err on her actually being like real. Because if she was just a charlatan, I think like wouldn't she kind of God be like, you both suck. I'm not answering anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Samuel, so it works. The woman, even though Saul is disguised, because she's asking Samuel, like, oh yeah, that's Saul over there, and she's like, oh shoot, Saul, the guy who wants us dead. Oh no, and he's like, no, just please tell me what Samuel's saying. So this is where, and Bray points this out as well. We have read already the Amalekites being genocided, eradicated. I believe the scripture, as Bray mentions, it says down to like the last child in the womb. And then we're told the Amalekites are still around. So
sorry, Hody, I'm gonna have to duck out. I got a work issue that's just popped up, and I'm gonna have to head out real quick.
I love you. I missed you.
Yeah,
I appreciate you being here, man.
Absolutely.
Have fun. Yeah. So let's see. Going further with this here. So yeah, the Amalekites are still around. Saul is told he's going to get punished for not going to war with them, as he should have. Well, are they around to do war against, or were they eradicated? I've heard some people try to explain this away as being like we're told we were like the Amalekites were Amalekites in spirit, like they picked up like their traditions or something like that, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense, because that's, again, it's still a nation of people when they're talking about it here. Brain note, side note, the word for pharmacology is the Hebrew word for potion making. Oh, there you go. That is interesting. So again, something we're not supposed to do. In fact, one of the things that I think Bray points out here, which I found interesting, is mediumship, potion making, and conjuring. And all three of these things are things that either Jesus does blatantly or at the very least kind of does. And again, that kind of shows that we're getting at branches of problems without getting at roots of problems. We want to stop people from making poisoned potions, sure. But the idea that we shouldn't explore like real potions, like that ends up being like pharmacology, like that's a real science, like that's good for us, I mean, really shouldn't be stopping all this stuff. And to generalize everybody, illegalize it all, because of, even if many or most people are abusing it, it's not right, let's see here. So yeah, like I liked what Bray had to say about this, because it really was like kind of a precursor to what we see in the New Testament, that we see that this is something that's going to be good, beautiful, wonderful path for us, and a connection that we have with the Gentiles. We're showed that God is the God of the Gentiles already here in the Old Testament, that he is giving this woman a gift, and that gift is a good thing. Like I like that we kind of have this, and that it's the Jews who have kind of left the will of God in this time period, and they'll find their way back and then lose it, and find their way back and lose it, and so on and so forth. But that it's still possible to be a godly person, even if you kind of don't really recognize who God is, what he does, that it's possible for us to get kind of that essence of that Holy Spirit, by knowing the will of God, by being open to those inklings from the Holy Spirit. Bray mentions, or the potions in the temple used, like the oil of 5 used to anoint prophets, right? Like that's for us to do, but you can't do it. Beware of any organization that creates exceptions for themselves that you can't do, right? Like it's kind of always a sign that they're kind of onto something, because as Jesus says, man, everybody's welcome to cast out demons in my name, or cast out demons in any name, but there's really only one name under heaven that's going to work, right? Like, so it shouldn't be a threat of like, how dare you do that? That should be illegal. It's, you can't do that. It's not going to work. Bray mentions that part. I appreciate that, man. All right. I will go ahead without Aaron here. It's just a little emptier without him, but I'm glad you're here, Bray, and everybody else. Actually, we got quite a few viewers right now. and I appreciate you viewing. I'm going to go ahead and duck over into the current events time. It is that time, and it also makes my face look smaller when I do this. So this is the story of the week that I wanted to talk about. It actually just happened yesterday. The Department of Homeland Security Secretary misstates meaning of habeas corpus under Senate scrutiny. Okay, so I cannot believe that this is a story. Now, if you're an average person, you don't know what habeas corpus is. It sounds kind of Latin-y. It's kind of scary. I might not know what it is. I don't expect the common person to know what it is. But if you're the Department of Homeland Security and you have to deal with habeas corpus a lot, I would expect that you would know it. Now, habeas corpus is the kind of actually directly translated, it actually means like the right to your body. And it's the idea that if you are accused of a crime, that you get to represent yourself and defend yourself from that accusation, right? That there is they can't just detain your body, and just say like, we'll find something against you or accuse you of something, say it's true. You need to be able to prove that it's not true legally. And that's, just what habeas corpus is generally. When asked directly what it was, and this is the exact quote. There's not dots in here. We're not cutting off everything. But she responded, Kristi Noem responded, habeas corpus is a constitutional right that the president has to be able to remove people from this country. No, it is not. And that's not even close. I have no idea where she got that from, other than just like wanting it to be true. It's really like, it's really sad when the Democrats are schooling the Republicans about constitutionality, first of all. But yeah, like Hassan said, habeas corpus is the foundational right that separates free societies like America from police states like North Korea. Right. I get to represent myself here in America. That's part of it, And then, so after getting corrected on what it was, Noem replies, yes, I support habeas corpus. I also recognize that the president of the United States has the authority under the Constitution to decide if it should be suspended or not. And this is also untrue. Article 1, Section 9 actually prohibits the suspension of habeas corpus unless when in cases of rebellion or invasion, the public safety may require it. Now, obviously, they've been calling immigrants invaders for a while now. And it's for this reason, because they want to be able to create a constitutional exception in order to punish them. Bray over here says the suspension of due process is wild, literally enshrined in the Bill of Rights and rubbed more than any of the others in less than 6 months. Rubbled. Yeah. Suspending due process, habeas corpus, I know Aaron says this a lot, but it's as bad as it gets, man. Like this is not something, it feels like I'm saying this all the time, but you can't do this in a free society. You need to be able to prove that you're innocent of anything. And it's just just principally thinking. If I say, Bray, you're a murderer, and they lock you up and kill you, and you say, well, I can prove that I didn't. Well, if you didn't get due process, then you can't prove that you didn't. If we talk about illegal, if I say, prove you're a legal citizen, and you're like, I'll show my certificate. Okay. But what if you don't get a process in which you can show your birth certificate? What if you don't get a process in which you can show your immigration papers? And then they're like, I'll avoid breaking the law so that they'll never accuse me of that. Okay. How do you prove that you didn't break the law? Like, you need to be able to have a system that proves that you didn't or did do whatever it was, right? Bray says, if you have no right to person, property, and papers, you're a serf at best. That's where we are. The road to serfdom is over. We're here. Yeah. Like and the thing is maybe you're not targeted yet, but you're going to get targeted. And the thing is like, this scares a lot of people into like holding the line, into not wanting to be, troublemakers, and not wanting to tell inconvenient truth or publish pieces that are blatantly true. Marco Rubio, I believe it was just today or yesterday, they were like, you kicked this person, you stripped away their immigration status for an op-ed piece. And he's like, yeah, and we plan to do more, right? Like for these opinions, that your ability to exist here is based on them allowing you to be here. And that's just wrong. This is something that can be abused by, I want to make this really clear too. This is not unique to Trump. There are people that have been suspending due process. I bring up frequently that Obama blew up a journalist he didn't like with a drone, right? Like this is bad. But this, first of all, it's accelerating. We need to recognize that. Before, I think the defense would always be like, oh, I didn't mean to hit that reporter. It happened that way. Right now they're like, yes, we're doing it. Like we're telling you we're doing this. And that certainly is a unique escalation in this. And it's important that we recognize exactly how bad that is going forward. Democrats can do this. Even if you think the Republicans are great, the Democrats are terrible. Imagine if they had this power during COVID, right? Like power over your body to make sure that, oh, hey, papers, please. Oh, you're not vaccinated? Well, I'm not going to give you any of this. Oh, I'm not allow you to prove you're vaccinated or not vaccinated. I don't care. Which journalist? He did it a few times. The Bush era was a nightmare. I did not know there were multiple journalists, and that makes me sad. I worked on the George W. Bush campaign for re-election to let you know exactly how far off in right field I was over there. I think after that it became like libertarian-ish, or it stopped being fun anymore. I remember just kind of seeing the results and I started reading the Bible and just having a lot of things pushed on my heart that was like, this isn't good stuff. And that was kind of like, I was really into politics, but I think that was the last time I was really into like thinking that there was hope for either the Republicans or the Democrats. I was very sour on it after then. It's getting worse, right? Like this is something that was kind of predictable. It's unfortunate that this is one of those things that everybody assumed Trump was kind of lying about. I was like, he's going to suspend due process to deport. Like, what were the signs they even held at the convention? Like 20 million deported or whatever like that. Like, they're bragging about deporting more than the number of illegal immigrants that we have in America. And sure enough, like it ended up, that's what he wants, and that's where we're at. It's really bad. And it can feel hopeless. I have a really good friend who's a bit he's new politically, but he knows what he likes and what he doesn't like. And so he doesn't understand like the philosophy behind it, but he's like, what do I do to just stop these people from being evil? And I'm just like, man, voting or guns is the answer, like politically, science-wise, I'm supposed to give you, but I don't like either of those answers. I don't find them particularly effective. I think it's not political in its solution, but cultural. We need to teach people to love their neighbors better. Anybody who loves their neighbors is not going to stand by and watch their neighbors get subject to this. Yeah, it's wrong. Bray says, you mean the domestic journalists with the drone? Yeah, I hit journalists in several countries for what they wrote, but that one was particularly Orwellian. Yeah, I guess, boy, and that's really sad because that just kind of shows how nationalist I was in my thinking, that the fact that it was other countries' journalists and I didn't even know, but he kills one of our journalists and it's like a big deal that I remember in my head. We're all God's children, unfortunately, and I have not always been a great representative for that. I'm happy to be on a writer side now, and at least in a good and healthy direction where we're at. But yeah, I've grown. I haven't always been right. It's one of the things that made me passionate about correcting more so than like trying to own or school somebody. That I want people to have those outlets to get better. I was an incredibly bad place. I mean, I was a misogynist. I was a self-professed misogynist. That's not like somebody accused me of that. I actually called myself that. I was definitely in the manosphere. I was definitely, probably never got into like race realism because the science was never there, but certainly identified with being white more than even identifying with recognizing other people were like my brothers and sisters in Christ, that caught up in that kind of culture. I'm embarrassed about it. I'm certainly not proud. I'm not going to write a book about how it's like, and I'm still getting better, as we read through these gospels. It's been so awesome to read through the Bible with the Love First Christians and kind of get more feedback on everything. Because I just find every time I go through this, there's new light that I just don't remember seeing before. The Bible's definitely hit me in different ways right now than, I was closed off to some stuff. And I think even now I'm still closed off to some things. I don't want to be. But, I naturally read something and I'm like, I don't really know how to reconcile that. And so my brain's like, let's not reconcile that at all, right? Neurons are really good about putting memories behind like locked doors that are complicated to unlock. I remember reading this book, Idiot Brain. And we actually remember almost everything that happens to us, every scene in our lives. It's all there. What differentiates it is not whether we remember it, but our accessibility. That our brain will actually plant living memories that we're having right now. And if it doesn't seem important, we'll shoot it to the darkest recesses of your brain and just be like, it's there if you really need it. But I'm going to put, a padlock that's almost impossible to remember through it, right? This is why and people will do this with like traumatic events, right? Like everybody technically remembers those. And that's why it takes a psychologist to kind of be like, how do we unlock that padlock to actually get there so we can actually address those things? Bray says, growth is normal, bruv. A lack of it is what ruins us. I was a very different person 20 years ago. Yeah. I mean, thank God for growth, right? That we're all able to grow. I am super grateful that God knows our hearts, that he loves each and cares about each and every one of us, that this is the same God who loves the sparrows, right? And knows what's going to happen to them. And he knows the stones of the earth and counts the numbers of the grain of sand. And so that he cares about me and knows that as imperfect as I am and as faulty as I am and as, the sins that I commit, that I mentioned, that I commit even knowing that they're sins and it's bad. I'm not bragging about it, but they, I know that they're there, but I'm grateful for that grace and that ability to grow. And I do, wrestling with these things is a wonderful thing. I mean, ultimately, people don't like to hear this, but life is better with things that like you've conquered than just having everything handed to you, like if you're just always an honest person, good for you. Right. But like, I value honesty so much more having lived life for a while as a dishonest person. It makes me value it that much more. And I think even if you don't have to sin personally, seeing those sins observationally in the field, makes us be grateful for it. Right. Like I've never done drugs, right? Like I'm clean. I've never had alcohol or drugs. And seeing other people that grips their lives, I'm grateful for that, right? Like it makes me appreciate it more than just if alcohol and drugs were never a thing. I don't know. There's nothing special about being sober, right? There's nothing all that interesting about it. So whatever. And so wrestling with this makes us appreciate it a lot better. I've mentioned this probably 5 or 6 times before, but there's a reason during interventions, the person who leads the session is somebody who struggles with what the person is struggling with at the intervention, right? Like that they are better. I'm thankful for every crocodile in the river. If you saw the meme, I don't think I did. But I've seen the the crocodiles like sunning themselves and like the river's like just like covered with them. Maybe there's I'm gonna look this up. Look this meme up real quick here. Crocodile in the river meme. I found a bunch of crocs in the river. Maybe that's what it is. Probably not, but is this what you had in mind? Beware the croc infested waters. I'm sure that's not it, but the internet's a fun place. Ace Ventura popping up from the river like, I made it, I'm alive, and the croc pops up. Yeah, I am just grateful for all of it, imperfections as they are. It's yeah. It's in our Facebook DM. Okay, well, did you just send it, or is this something that I've seen before that I just memory hold because I suck as a person? Oh yeah, you sent this on May 12th. Look at this. You sent another thing on May 8th that I didn't see. Bray, I'm sorry about being a bad friend. I have got a lot of messages here that I obviously need to catch up on. But yeah, I appreciate you making time for stuff like this anyhow. And everybody else who joined here, I really appreciate you. Obviously good viewership again this week. I really appreciate our small but happy group. As always, you have an open invite to join the Love First Christians. We're a free Discord-based community. You've got an invite. If you want to talk about all this stuff that we read, I mentioned only a fraction of what was discussed. And so if this is the type of topic that interests you, if these type of conversations that interests you, you're welcome to meet people like me and Bray and Aaron and Ben and Patty and all kinds of great people. And yeah, just kind of have those discussions. And we just recently got Kem. I'm always appreciative of Bread. See, now here's the problem. I'm going to forget people, right, that have contributed. And when you have a group of 200 people or something, that all of a sudden I'm just going to start forgetting very important people. But you're all very important to me. I really appreciate it, even if you don't participate at all, but just to drop in an occasional question or comment, it means a lot. Everybody enjoy the rest of your week. We'll continue with the Bible study, and I look forward to talking to you all next week. Have a good one. Kisses, everybody, and goodbye.